When I first started my blog a couple of years ago now, one of the very first entries I wrote was about this place where I am today. It's just St Mary's Loch and the Loch of the Lochs, or the Lochs, as we always know it. So I thought it was apt for me to come here and record one of my first podcasts as well, for the simple reason that this place means so much to me, from my childhood memories of coming here to the present day where I bring my own family here. It's a great wee day trip spot for anybody from Innerleithen or the borders. I'm standing next to the statue of James Hogg, which overlooks, well, three things really. It overlooks Tibby Shiels Inn, overlooks St Mary's Loch to the left, and to the right, the Loch of the Lochs. Tibby Shiels Inn was an old pub, an inn, run by the formidable Tibby Shiels. I think she lived till she was 99 years old. She's buried in Ettrick Kirkyard, same place that James Hogg, who will come to later. And her husband, winningly, one of the facts about Tibby Shiels, her husband was the local mole catcher. Quite an important profession then, as now, I suppose, for agriculture. Tibby Shiels is closed now, unfortunately. The owner doesn't open it for meals or a bar anymore, but you can camp there. I know it's popular with Southern Upland Way walkers. The Southern Upland Way goes right past it on its way to Traquair. And then to the left there's St Mary's Loch, which is, I think, by quite a distance really, the longest loch, or the biggest loch in the Scottish borders. We don't have that many lochs down here, unfortunately. Not natural ones anyway. We've got some pretty big reservoirs. There's Whitidder out in Berwickshire, and up the hill behind me you've got Megget, Fruid and Tala, but they're not natural. They're man-made reservoirs, whereas St Mary's Loch is natural. And the Loch of the Lochs to the right there is a smaller loch, but very popular. It's where the car park is, where the cafe is. You try getting parked there in the summer, you'll find out how popular it is. They were at one point, St Mary's and the Lochs were one loch, continuous loch. And this is where any geography teachers listening are going to start pulling their hair out at me. I should have really stuck in a bit more in second year geography, but I think it's something to do with alluvial deposits. So over the thousands and thousands of years, silt, sand, rock is brought down here by streams, and eventually has formed a kind of land bridge in between the two lochs with just I was going to say a small burn running between them, but it's actually quite a big river today. We've had quite a bit of rain overnight. Autumn is well and truly hit. You'll probably be able to hear the wind blowing about me as well. But yeah, it's an alluvial plain, I think. Again, I'm really sorry, geography teachers, if you're listening. But it's split them in two, and interestingly, there are other parts of St Mary's Loch where they expect the same thing to happen, but long after we're all gone, St Mary's Loch will be divided once again. That's a very brief introduction to St Mary's Loch and Loch of the Lochs. I'm going to take a wee wander now and tell you a bit more. Oh, it's sky breezy. This will be a test for my admittedly quite cheap microphone. Any sponsors listening want to buy me a new one, I'd be delighted to receive any offers. Anyway, I mentioned there about the Southern Upland Way, which does go past here, and it was actually officially opened at Tibby Shiels Inn 40 years ago this year, so it's 40 years old. And it was opened by Michael Ancrum, who was an MP at the time. He passed away last week. He was the chief of the Clan Kerr in Lord Lothian, one of the big border families, the Kerrs. So rest in peace to Mr Ancrum, but it was he that opened the Southern Upland Way officially at Tibby Shiels Inn 40 years ago this past year. And it heads off down the other bank of the St Mary's Loch there and towards the March Wood. So March is always an interesting name to see on a map because it usually means a boundary or a border at some point. So I don't know which families or clans or whatever that was a border between, but I think at the moment it's a border between the Earl of Weems and March, who owns all of this land up here near the Loch of the Lochs, and Till Hill Forestry, who've put huge commercial forestry plantations on the hillside up there, which, I I don't know, they don't look particularly nice, I don't think, when you see a crop like that, but it is what it is, I guess. We do need timber. I think we probably do a bit less of it in the borders, though, to be honest with you. But the Marchwood itself is very pretty because it's Scots pine. It's not a natural wood, it's been planted at some point, but it's nicely laid out Scots pine with lots of light getting into it. It's very, very pleasant, very pretty. And beyond that, you come to, well, if you look at the map, you would call it Bowerhope, the farm there, but I believe the local herds would call it Beerhope. It's a lovely, very traditional borders farmhouse, surrounded with some sheep fields. Directly across the loch from there is St Mary's Kirkyard, an ancient kirkyard, which is now, well, there's no kirk left, there's a few headstones. It's a very atmospheric spot, actually, but it's directly opposite Beerhope, or Bowerhope. And there's a good wee story about that, actually. The farmer at Beerhope, we're going back a bit now, probably in the 1800s. The farmer was in the field there doing whatever he does with 2 farmhands, and he happened to look up and right across the loch, and it's about 1 kilometre wide at that point. It's quite a distance. And he was looking at the old kirkyard, and he saw these spectral, ghostly figures in white dancing about in the kirkyard. Perhaps he'd had a couple of whiskies the night before or read Tam O'Shanter, but he was terrified, thought that this was the end of days. People had been resurrected at their graves and were dancing, and so he went inside, being a good Presbyterian, to pray for his earthly salvation. His farmhands, on the other hand, were a bit dubious about this, so they got into a boat and they rowed across the loch, which would have been a decent effort, especially if it was a crosswind like it is today. And when they got to the churchyard, they found no ghosts or spectres or anything of the kind, but they found a drunken pedlar who'd spent the night before at Tibby Shields, got Guy Foo and Unco Happy, fell into the loch, got soaking, and he was actually drying all his clays on a line, hence the white things dancing about in the wind. So nothing ghostly at all, it was just somebody's old knickers drying in the wind. So after you leave the Southern Upland Way behind, your eyes will be drawn towards Dry Up Tower, one of the many ruined towers you see around the borders. This one's actually in reasonable nick. If you go up close to it, you can get inside it, and there's steps that will take you up to the top, and you get a lovely view back over St Mary's Loch and into the hills. It was a tower of the Scott family, like many in Ettrick and Yarrow, and we'll deal more with the Scots as we go through this series of podcasts. But it's well worth a diversion. My only word of advice would be careful for bulls. I've been in there a couple of times, and there's quite often a big bull in the field. He'll generally leave you alone if you leave him alone, but just be careful. So coming round on the path, you'll then make it to St Mary's Kirkyard, as I mentioned before, where the drunken pedlar dried off his linen. They actually hold, I think they still do this every year, there used to be something called blanket preaching there, where they have an outdoor service, and it's to commemorate the Covenanters who held all those services outside when they became persecuted. I think that still happens at Easter every year, but do let me know if I'm wrong. After St Mary's, you'll come to the wee, I hesitate to even call it a hamlet, but Cappercleuch, one of those great border names, Cappercleuch. And from there, you're passing the outflow of the Megget Water, and it's here that the scientists predict that St Mary's will be cut into 3 at some point in the distant centuries. But by damming the Megget Water in the early 1980s, they've certainly slowed that process up quite a bit, so it'll take a long time before that happens. But just up from there, there's quite a good tale to be told, and it's called the Border Widow's Lament. Now the story goes that Coburn of Henderland, and that area is called Henderland, Coburn was a border reaver of some sort. I don't know what his crimes were, possibly rustling cattle, who knows, stealing a couple of sheep, trying to feed his family. A difficult and dangerous time, that's for sure. But the story goes that James V, the young James V, was trying to purge the borders off the reavers, and he arrived at Henderland and summarily hung Coburn in his doorway. And his widow, or his soon-to-be widow, not wanting to hear the anguished screams of her husband, is said to have taken herself to the Dowlin waterfall, which is tucked away just behind Henderland. And the sound of the waterfall drowned out the sound of her husband's screams as he died. Now, is that 100% true? Possibly not. We know that Coburn was killed, he was executed, but from what I've read, it may well have been in Edinburgh rather than at his door in Henderland. However, it's a great story, and if you go up there now, you can actually go up to the Dowlin waterfall. It takes a little bit of effort, I have to tell you. It's a little bit slippy, but you can see there's a seat where she's said to have sat when Coburn was killed. And you can visit Coburn's grave, which is a small mound just behind Henderland Farm. It's a really nice wee spot to have held such a dark story. And before you know it, you're back in the shadowy James Hogg statue, known as the Ettrick Shepherd. Shepherd, poet, author, man of letters, and a great figure about these parts. Right, that just about concludes my virtual tour around the Lochs. I hope you've enjoyed joining me for it. It is a wonderful place to come all year round, I think. It's always busy in the summer, but now in autumn the leaves are changing, it's beautiful, albeit it is a bit cold and it is a bit windy, so I'm looking forward to getting back to the car for a cup of tea to heat us up. St Mary's has always been popular with visitors. It's on a pretty good road between Selkirk and Moffat. We were coming here as kids. Car park would be quite busy when we were having our wee picnics and what have you. But there's no doubt at all that in the last 3 or 4 years, certainly since COVID, it's busier than it's ever been. And it has put pressure on the Loch a wee bit in terms of, well, human activity. And I suppose my sort of closing thoughts really is, when you look around St Mary's Loch, there's 4 farms. I've talked about a couple of them already that are dotted round the Loch. And in some cases, those farms have been farmed by the same families for 8 or 9 generations, which is unbelievable, really, quite remarkable. And I guess it's just, when we do come to places like this, it's to remember how important it is to respect them and to look after them and care for them like future generations, like those farmers have done down the generations. So definitely somewhere I recommend you come and visit any time of year. But if you do come in autumn on a day like this, make sure to bring a flask of tea. See you soon.